Breaking tonight, alarming new reports on the size and scope of the Obama administration's surveillance of the American people, including President Trump and his transition team. In this newly surfaced video, House Intelligence Committee Chair Devin Nunes, who stepped down from the House Russia investigation last month amid controversy, is seen speaking openly about what he uncovered in his probe. Very interesting. Watch.
I went and looked at what I knew existed on the unmaskings, but what I found was a treasure trove of stuff that's really bad in terms of surveillance on America. It's really horrible because it endangers America, because the work that our intelligence professionals do is so critical to our safety. To have an administration, a past administration, abuse these powers and put our country in jeopardy, there's no words that can explain the damage that they've done, the damage that they've created.
It's pretty stunning. Here now to weigh in, Utah Senator Mike Lee, the author of the new book, Written Out of History, The Forgotten Founders Who Fought Big Government, and because of that, we get to have him here in New York. It's good to see you, Senator. Thank you for coming by. What strikes you in Devin Nunes' words? Because I know this is something that you've been concerned about a long time.
This is what governments do when they're left unrestrained. It's one of the reasons I wrote this book, Written Out of History. I talk about James Otis, among other forgotten founders, who was a big believer in the fact that governments will intrude into a man's house, into a man's privacy, unless they're specifically restricted from doing so. It's one of the reasons why we need the Fourth Amendment to tell the government that it can't do certain things to us. Seizure. Yes.
Let's put this up on the screen, because this is the FISA court just recently scolding the former Obama administration. They said the court ascribed the government's failure to disclose those reviews to an institutional lack of candor on NSA's part, and emphasized that, quote, this is a very serious Fourth Amendment issue. So people look at this and they think about, the unmasking and Mike Flynn and everything, but what does it mean to the normal average person?
What it means is that the government can use the overwhelming force and power of government to engage in political espionage, to engage in all kinds of manipulation in order to harm.
Like what we saw with the IRS, for example.
Like that, and worse. There was this committee back in the 70s called the Church Committee. It looked into abuses like this. It concluded that every presidential administration, starting with FDR all the way at least through Nixon, had used intelligence gathering agencies within the government to engage in political espionage. This is human nature. This is why we need a constitution. It's why we need limits on government.
Let me put up something that deals with legislation here, because this is President Trump this morning talking about health care and tax reform, which we were just talking about. I think a lot of people who voted for him would like him to get back to this business. The U.S. Senate, he said, should switch to 51 votes immediately and get health care and tax cuts approved fast and easy. Dems would do it, no doubt. What do you think?
Okay, so first of all, we have procedures in the Senate that allow us to pass certain bills without having to have 60 votes for cloture. And two of those things happen to be Obamacare repeal and tax reform. So in this instance, we don't even need to go to that discussion. Now, I have grave concerns about getting rid of the filibuster rule for other reasons. We would have had single-payer health care by now with that. We would have had card check. We would have had all kinds of things that are bad for conservatives, bad for Republicans, bad for a lot of the things that Donald Trump stands for if we had gotten rid of the filibuster rule. But here, we can repeal Obamacare and we can do tax reform.
But you can't replace it.
Depends on what we do to replace it. But we can repeal it, and we can replace it with a lot of things. It's not a matter of whether we can do it. It's a matter of how we write it. There are ways to get this done with 51 votes. We don't have to go nuclear, and if we don't go nuclear, we preserve in the Senate a lot of things that will protect limited government, will protect the Constitution.
Yeah. So that would be under reconciliation. It's a budget vehicle, essentially, that proves that you're not going to add to the debt dramatically over a certain period of time, 10 years, I think it is, that allows you to pass it that way. So obviously the president's on board. He'd like to see that. I want to play this from Ben Sass and get your reaction, because here's what he said about the future of the GOP.
As you said, that you think the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both are intellectually exhausted. What does the Republican Party stand for at this point anymore?
I don't know.
Isn't that a problem?
Big
Is there
problem.
anybody?
Does that surprise you?
It is a big problem in the sense that anytime anyone, especially one of our Republican senators, can't identify exactly what the Republican Party stands for, we've got a problem. Now, look, what I believe it stands for is constitutionally limited government. What I believe it stands for are free markets, not for the purpose of limiting government, just with that as the goal, but with the purpose of having stronger families, stronger individuals, so that individuals can thrive. They can get ahead.
Do you feel that the president represents that?
Yes, and I think he was elected with a mandate to fight for America's hardworking families. so that America's hardworking families and middle class can expand, can grow, can achieve. That's what we've always wanted for our people. But government, especially a big, ever-growing federal government, makes that very difficult.
And didn't some of the founders, who we don't think about that often, say exactly that?
They did. In fact, that's exactly why I've written this book, Written Out of History.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our founding fathers weren't as well known. And some of them have been neglected, even deliberately written out because their stories, their demographics aren't convenient. They don't fit within the modern progressive narrative of a big federal government.
Give us one quick name before we go.
Mum Bet.
Don't know about.
She was a slave in Massachusetts, and she was a fighter. She was tenacious. She understood that if all human beings are created equally and are free and equal in the eyes of God, as they were determined to be by the Massachusetts Constitution written by John Adams, that she should be free. So she sued for her freedom, and she achieved it. She won. She's a hero, but she's been forgotten. Written Out of History by Mike Lee. Senator, thank you. Good to see you in New York. Good luck with the book. Thank you very much.
Thanks for stopping by.